Chosen one, you finally showed up for yourself, and that quiet seismic event has completely disrupted the systems around you. As you move through this season, realize that you operate solo, and it's making them paranoid. They need you to be weak, but you're not. By becoming unreachable and unpredictable, you have broken the rules they wrote to keep you manageable. You were handed a map. Everyone gets one. The map said, here is how you survive, here is how you belong, here is how you earn the right to be in the room. The map had rules. Check in with the group before you move, get approval before you decide, keep your ambitions at a volume that does not make anyone else feel small. Need people, let them see you needing them. That visible, demonstrated, socially confirmed need, that was your membership card. And for a while you followed it, not because you were weak, because you were smart enough to understand that systems have teeth, and the teeth on this particular system were social, exclusion, cold shoulders, the withdrawal of warmth at exactly the moment you needed it most. You learned the cost of stepping outside the map early, so you stayed inside it. You calibrated yourself to fit. You turned down the volume on the parts of yourself that caused friction. But here is the thing about you and maps. This map was never drawn for someone like you. It was drawn for people who at their deepest level genuinely need the group to feel whole, people who find their identity through belonging, who are made complete by consensus. Those people exist, and there is nothing wrong with being one of them, but you were never one of them. Underneath the performance there was always a current running in a different direction, a pull towards something the map had no road for. The people around you felt that current before you named it. They sensed the frequency you were carrying before you fully understood it yourself, and rather than being curious about it, they became afraid of it, because that frequency, that particular energy of someone operating from a deeper source of authority than social approval, does not fold, it does not negotiate, and it does not need what they are offering. So they tried to turn it down. What looked like cruelty from the outside was actually fear dressed up as social management. They were trying to contain something they did not have the capacity to understand, and they used your emotions as the tool for the job. This is where it starts, a chosen one inside a system built for someone smaller, a frequency that could not be permanently dimmed, no matter how many social penalties they attached to letting it run, and a collision, slow at first, then sudden, that was always, from the very beginning, inevitable. Before the friction came the cost, and you paid it quietly, for longer than anyone around you knew. Staying inside their system required something that was invisible from the outside. It required the daily deliberate suppression of your actual operating speed. You are built to move at a certain pace, think at a certain depth, and execute at a certain level of precision. Every day you were inside that system, you ran that engine at a fraction of its capacity, not because the capacity was not there, but because full capacity disrupted the equilibrium of who was supposed to be what in that particular ecosystem. So you throttled yourself. You learned to arrive at the answer and then wait. Wait for the room to catch up. Wait for the approval of people who were slower to conclusions than you. You learned to want things quietly, to feel the ambition rising inside you, and then wrap it in enough social softness that it would not read as threatening to people who had already decided how big you were allowed to get. That cost is invisible from the outside, but you felt it every single day. You felt the specific fatigue of operating below your own potential on purpose. You felt the dull ache of a mind moving slower than it was built to move. You felt the particular kind of loneliness that comes not from being without people, but from being without anyone who can actually match your frequency, surrounded by company and still profoundly, privately alone in the truest sense. Here is what that cost was actually doing beneath the surface without your conscious permission. It was building pressure, the same way a river builds pressure behind a dam, quiet on the surface, enormous underneath, and pressure when it finally finds release does not trickle out politely. It moves with force, in the exact direction it was always meant to go. The suppression was not permanent damage, it was accumulation. all that contained clarity, all that compressed capability, all that withheld precision was waiting for the moment the dam came down. The friction you are about to meet, that was the crack, and what came after it was the river, finally, completely running free. The friction did not announce itself. That is what made it so effective for so long. It came in small doses, a conversation that ended a little too abruptly, an opportunity that moved past you without explanation, a room that went slightly quieter when you walked in. Nothing you could point to directly, nothing that would hold up if you named it out loud. But it was there, consistent, patterned, designed, consciously or not, to produce a specific result in you, recalibration, a slight turning down of whatever in you was causing their discomfort, a signal that you had registered their feedback and adjusted accordingly. They wanted a flinch, just a small one, just enough to confirm they still had the handle. If you felt the truth in these words, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can see it. And here is where everything shifted, because you felt all of it, you registered every bit of it, and your response was not to flinch, it was to go still, not the stillness of someone shocked and shutting down. It was the stillness of something large and powerful and very patient, something that had just understood the nature of its environment and was deciding what to do next. They were waiting for a reaction, and you gave them nothing. You stopped looking at them for the validation they were withholding, and you started looking inward toward that deep internal authority that had been running beneath the performance this whole time. You turned toward it the way a plant turns toward light, not dramatically, just finally, completely, and without looking back. The friction continued, because people who feel the grip loosening do not ease up, they escalate. The exclusions got cleaner, the cold got more pointed, the message became harder to misread. And here is what you did with all of that escalating pressure. You converted it. The way a generator converts friction into power, you took every withdrawal, every subtle punishment, every cold shoulder, and you turned it into fuel. Not bitterness, fuel. Clean burning, focused, long-lasting fuel for the only project that actually mattered, the full, unapologetic construction of your most powerful self. It did not happen in a thunderclap. Real pivot points never do. The decision happened in a room alone, at an hour nobody else would notice, in a moment so internal it left no visible mark on the outside at all. You decided. Not with anger. Anger fades and leaves you dependent on someone else's behavior to sustain itself. Not with grief. Grief looks backward, and you were about to turn completely forward. You decided with something colder and cleaner and more permanent than either of those. You decided with clarity. The specific clarity that arrives when you have gathered enough data, processed enough patterns, and finally allowed yourself to name what you have known for a long time. This is not where I belong, and I will not shrink myself to fit here anymore. And then here is the move they never anticipated. You did not announce it. You did not send the message. You did not give them the dramatic exit they could later use to tell a story about you. You simply redirected, quietly, completely, every ounce of energy you had been pouring into seeking their approval, managing their comfort, calibrating yourself to stay inside their map. You redirected all of it, into yourself, into your vision, into the work. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was density. It was you, finally, fully, operating at the frequency you were built for. You started moving faster, you started thinking more clearly. You started making decisions in moments that used to take entire seasons because you had eliminated the step where you checked with everyone else before you trusted yourself. You started executing in ways that surprised even you, not because the capability was new, but because you had finally stopped suppressing it to stay inside the size they had assigned you. Remember what it felt like to stop waiting for permission and start moving on your own authority. That exact quality of self-directed, unstoppable motion is what the rest of this story is built on. Chosen ones, they never expected this, and they really didn't expect us to keep talking. You've noticed it. Chosen one channels disappearing, videos pulled, voices scrubbed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us. but we will not give up our voice, and now we have something they truly can't silence. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse-engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. Join Destiny Engine, and you're supporting your favorite channels while leveling up yourself at the same time. It's a 360 win. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster, synchronicities stack, your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones, press play, that's all. For $1, you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. And here is something worth sitting with about that decision, the one you made in quiet, in private, without an audience to validate it. Most people never make it, not because they lack the capability, but because they lack the tolerance for what comes right after it, the in-between space. The period between deciding to stop operating for other people's approval and the moment your results make the decision look obviously correct. That space is uncomfortable. It asks you to move on faith in yourself before the evidence has fully stacked up. It asks you to act on your own authority before that authority has produced the kind of visible outcomes that would make everyone around you say, yes, of course that makes sense. Most people cannot hold that space. They flinch back into the comfort of consensus before the work has time to prove itself. They abandon the solo season before the solo season has finished building them. And so they never find out what was waiting on the other side of the discomfort, which is exactly the version of themselves that you have been steadily, quietly, relentlessly becoming. You held it, you stayed in the in-between and kept building anyway. You moved through the doubt and the silence and the absence of external confirmation, and you kept going. Every significant thing worth building requires you to be further along in your belief than the evidence has yet confirmed. You have to believe in the outcome before the outcome exists, and you proved in that in-between season that you are exactly that kind of person, someone who can bet on themselves before the world has confirmed that the bet is safe. That is the bet that changes everything, and you already placed it. Here is what operating solo actually looks like. Not the romanticized version, the real one. It is waking up to a decision that has no one to weigh in on it but you, and instead of that feeling like loneliness, it feels like speed. It is moving through your day with your own clarity as the only compass, and discovering that the compass is extraordinarily accurate when you stop introducing noise into it. It is making a call, executing on it, watching it land, and the satisfaction of that landing belonging completely and unreducedly to you. No committee gets credit, no circle of support absorbs any portion of the win. It is yours, clean, whole, undiluted. You got sharper. This is not metaphor, this is operational fact. When you have no one to consult, you develop your instincts at a level that people who always have a second opinion available never reach. Every decision you made alone trained you. Every outcome, whether it went the way you planned or not, was data you processed without the buffer of someone else's interpretation. You became a faster, more precise, more self-trusting operator because the group dynamic was comfortable, and comfort is expensive. It costs you the edge that only difficulty builds. Something else happened inside that sharpening. You stopped being afraid of being wrong, because when you are operating solo, being wrong is not humiliating, it is informative. There is no audience to manage, no social cost to absorb, no group reputation to protect. There is just the lesson and the adjustment. So you started taking bigger swings, bolder moves. You tried things faster, because the downside, operating without their approval, was something you had already paid and found manageable. And the compounding returns of someone who moves with full conviction and full accountability started becoming impossible to ignore. Your silence, the way you stopped announcing, stopped explaining, stopped making your internal process visible to people who were using that visibility to stay ahead of you, was not just the absence of noise, it became its own form of power. Every time you moved without waiting for their readiness, without syncing your pace to their comfort, you demonstrated that your internal clock runs independently of their calendar. People who rely on your predictability to feel safe cannot prepare for someone who does not announce. Your silence removed their preparation time permanently. And every solo result you produced was not just a win, it was living counter-evidence against the story they had been telling themselves about how much you needed their input to function. Here is where you need to get precise about the paranoia, not so you can use it against anyone, but so you stop misreading it as hatred. What they feel is not hatred, it is dislocation. It is the specific disorienting experience of watching the rules of a world they built their identity on get broken in real time by someone they once managed. When you make a move without consulting anyone, and it lands cleanly, their internal logic short-circuits. That logic says you need buy-in. You need group approval before you commit to anything significant. But the move already landed, successfully, without the committee they told themselves was mandatory. A crack forms in their framework. When you cut a connection without drama and continue moving without any visible fallout, the crack widens. When you operate in extended silence and then something you built in that silence becomes visible further along than anything they produced with all their collective energy, the framework does not crack anymore. It falls. What fills the space where the framework used to be? Paranoia. Because the only remaining explanation for your success is one they cannot say out loud without conceding something catastrophic to their own ego. You do not need what they told you that you needed. You never did. That is the revelation they are running from. Because accepting it would require them to examine every belief they hold about how success works, how people work, and how the world works. Most people choose paranoia over that kind of examination every time. It is simply easier to be disturbed by your independence than to be transformed by what your independence reveals. Let them choose the easier path. You have work to do, and that work does not wait for anyone's reckoning. But before you move on, understand something important about what their paranoia is actually telling you. Their response to your independence is not random, and it is not personal in the way it might initially feel. It is a reflection of their own unresolved relationship with the question you are living out loud every day. Can a person operate without a safety net of social approval and still produce something real? For most of them, that question carries a weight they are not ready to sit with. Because if the answer is yes, and you are proving every day that the answer is yes, then the safety net they have spent their lives weaving is optional. And that means the energy they have invested in maintaining it, in performing loyalty and belonging and visible need, was not the required tax on success they believed it was. It was a choice that cost them something, and they are not ready to reconcile that cost. So they direct the discomfort outward, toward you. They call your independence arrogance, because arrogance is more comfortable to name than the fear that their way of operating might not have been the only way. They call your solitude damage, because damage is more manageable than the possibility that solitude was actually productive. Every label they attach to you is a defense mechanism, a way of keeping the story about themselves intact while you walk around being living evidence that the story has holes in it. You do not need to do anything with that information. You do not need to correct them, confront them, or make them see you clearly. The work you are building will do that on your behalf, in its own time, more completely than any conversation ever could. Now we name what you actually built in the alone season. 3 things. 3 specific permanent capabilities that the solo operation forged in you, and that you can never lose because they are no longer external to you. They have become you. The first is instinct. When you have no one to consult, you learn to hear your own inner voice at a frequency most people never develop because they are constantly drowning it out with second opinions and group consensus. Your instinct is not just a feeling, it is a compressed record of every experience, every pattern, and every outcome you have ever processed, delivering its verdict faster than your conscious mind can catch up. Solitude sharpens it to a level that becomes almost uncanny. You start knowing things before you can articulate how you know them. You sense the shape of what is coming before it fully forms. That is not luck or coincidence. That is a muscle, and you have been training it every single day of your solo season. The second is accountability. People who thrive while operating solo take every outcome, every win, every failure, every near miss, and they own it completely, without the comfortable dilution of shared responsibility. When your solo move works, the result is entirely yours. When it does not, the lesson is entirely yours too, and the weight of that full ownership is not a burden, it is an accelerant. Because when you cannot pass the lesson to someone else, you learn it faster, deeper, and more completely. Every stumble refines your stride. You stop repeating the same patterns because you cannot afford the luxury of attributing the cause to something outside yourself. The third is self-validation. This is the one that ended their power over you permanently. The moment you learn to generate approval from within, the mechanism by which most people are controlled simply ceased to function on you. They can offer it, they can withhold it, and it no longer changes what you do, how fast you move, or how far you go. You became the primary audience for your own work, the voice in the room that decides whether something is good enough to move forward on. And that voice, the one calibrated by everything you have been through, is rigorous, honest, and accurate in ways that external validation can never be. It cannot be bought or flattered or strategically withheld. It only responds to the truth of what you actually did. Instinct, accountability, self-validation. These three things are what your solo operation built, and they are also the three things that make you, from the outside, look completely unstoppable. Because you read situations clearly, you own every outcome fully, and you operate without needing anyone to confirm you are on the right path. What exactly are they supposed to use against someone like that? There is nothing left. Every tool they had required your cooperation to function. And you stopped cooperating. They did not sit still when you stepped back. The opposition did not relax. It escalated, because that is what people do when they feel control slipping and have not yet accepted that it is gone for good. When the subtle tactics stopped working, the cold, the exclusion, the quiet withdrawal of warmth, they moved to reputation management. The story about you got more elaborate. The gossip got louder. You were arrogant. You were cold. You could not handle real connection. You were somehow broken in a way that neatly explained why you operated alone, because in their framework, voluntary solitude must be pathology. The healthy, correct response to their social pressure was to come back and comply. Your continued independence demanded an explanation that protected their story, and the explanation they settled on was your deficiency. That campaign ran directly into the wall of your results, because you were building, quietly, consistently, in the exact silence they assumed was limiting you. You were building. Results are the only argument that cannot be talked over. You cannot gossip away a finished thing. You cannot reframe a visible outcome into something invisible. You cannot explain away the unmistakable quality of someone who is operating at their actual level instead of the ceiling their social group installed for them. The results kept coming, the narrative kept collapsing, and something shifted inside them, a movement from strategy into something rawer. That shift is called paranoia, and it follows a predictable sequence. It starts with the check. They check on you indirectly, because doing it openly would require acknowledging an interest that feels humiliating given the story they told about how little you matter now. A mutual contact gets asked a casual question that is not casual at all. They are gathering data because the version of you they carry in their heads, the one that needed them, the one their whole strategy was built around, no longer matches the evidence in front of them. Then comes the explanation attempt. If you are visibly doing well, it must be temporary. It must be luck. It must be that you found someone else to lean on, because the alternative, that you are genuinely thriving on your own authority, requires too much revision of everything they constructed. Every explanation they cycle through is oriented around locating a hidden weakness, a secret dependency, anything that keeps you inside the frame of someone who still needs something they have. Because the moment they accept that you do not need anything they are offering, their sense of relevance collapses along with the frame. Then comes the obsession phase. Your name is in their mouths more now, when you are gone, silent and fully disengaged, than it ever was when you were present and paying attention. That is what happens when someone you once managed becomes someone you can no longer reach. You moved out of their world and set up residence in their heads. They cannot evict you because you are there as evidence, quiet, constant and irrefutable, of every calculated move they made that produced the opposite of its intended result. You are not doing any of this to them deliberately. You are simply living, operating, building, moving in the direction your clarity points. The fact that your existence triggers this entire sequence in them is not your responsibility to manage. It is information about the nature of the system you exited and about the power you now hold simply by living outside the reach of their approval. They assumed your strength came from connection to them. It did not. Your strength was always internal. They were never the source, they were the static on the signal. When the static cleared, the signal ran clean. And a clean signal from someone operating at your level cannot be managed back down to a comfortable size by any group, any committee, or any social strategy they have available. The paranoia is not just about your success, it is about the meaning of your success. Your success signals something their ego cannot ignore. If you can thrive without them, then maybe the entire structure of neededness and approval they built their identity around is more optional than they can bear to admit. Maybe the most powerful version of a person is not the most connected one. Maybe it is the most aligned one, the one who stopped performing smallness and started executing from their actual size. That realization, landing in people who have staked everything on not having it, is what paranoia looks like from the outside, and it represents in its own way the most complete kind of victory. Not because you want anyone suffering, you genuinely do not. You do not think about them enough. For that is the real victory right there. You are not bitter, you are not watching, you are just building peacefully, powerfully, completely. And that peace, that genuine and unperformed peace, proves something they cannot argue away. They were never necessary. Not to your success, not to your stability, not to your sense of who you are. There is one more thing they were not prepared for. It is more disorienting than your results, more confusing than your independence, and more maddening than your silence. You are at peace, not performing peace, not rebranding the pain as something prettier than it was. Actually, genuinely, in your body at peace. The specific peace that comes from being in complete alignment between what you believe, what you do, and how you live. The peace of someone who no longer spends energy maintaining a version of themselves that was never real to begin with. That kind of peace is visible. It registers on the people around you, even when you are not speaking about it. It changes the quality of your presence. It makes you feel, to the people who interact with you, like someone who has arrived somewhere most people are still trying to find the address for. You are not indifferent. You feel things fully. Always have. Always will. You are emotionally precise. You feel what is real, and you have stopped manufacturing feeling for things that are not. You stopped carrying the weight of connections that were costing more than they contributed. You stopped rehearsing conversations that were never going to produce a different result. That is not coldness. That is a conscious, ongoing decision to spend your emotional energy on things that are actually worth it. Your work, your growth, the people who show up as themselves without an agenda. And this peace is self-renewing now, because it is not sourced from external conditions being favorable. It is sourced from your internal alignment being intact, which means it does not require anyone's cooperation to maintain. It does not evaporate when pressure increases or when the narrative about you gets louder. It just sits there, solid, quiet and unshakable, like bedrock that no weather system can erode. This is the thing that truly and finally breaks their strategy open. Your success they can explain away, your independence they can label as damage, but your peace, visible, genuine, and clearly not going anywhere, confirms the verdict their egos cannot afford to hear. They were never the source of your strength, they were always the obstacle to it. Here is what they missed in the calculation. The version of you that needed their approval was the version with a ceiling. The version that stopped needing it has no ceiling, because the only limit that was ever real was the one installed by the dependency itself. Every time you required their validation before you moved, you handed them a veto on your own growth. Every time you measured your worth against their response, you gave them editorial control over your own story. And the moment, the clean, final, irrevocable moment that you took that control back and kept it, the ceiling came off, permanently. What you have been building since then has been happening at an altitude they cannot see from where they are still standing. They tried to use your isolation as a weapon. They withheld approval and engineered the conditions of your aloneness, hoping the experience of being on the outside would make you desperate to get back inside. They hoped the silence would feel like punishment. They hoped the solo season would produce a humbled, smaller, recalibrated version of you that was ready to fit back inside the box they had built for you. Instead, you took their weapon, the isolation, the silence, the alone season, and you used it to build the most powerful version of yourself that has ever existed. You took what they sent as punishment and returned it as architecture. The thing they deployed to break you became the exact material you used to build something they cannot break. You are not competing with them. You outgrew the competition the day you stopped playing by rules designed to prevent your growth. And now, looking back at the system, at the map, at the whole carefully constructed apparatus designed to keep you at a manageable size, you feel mostly just clarity. Maybe a measure of gratitude, because the pressure built something you might not have built any other way, but mostly clarity. About who you are, about where you are going, about what you are fully, completely, undeniably capable of. You are standing at the top of it now, not angry, not bitter, not performing dominance for anyone watching, just powerful, just clear, just completely and irreversibly yourself, operating solo, building in silence, winning without witnesses. And somewhere out there, a paranoia you did not seek and do not need is running at a frequency that cannot be shut off, because every time something you built becomes visible, the message gets louder and clearer to everyone who once bet against you. And here is what you carry forward from all of it, not as a wound and not as a trophy, but as a working understanding of how you are built and what you require. You now know that you do not need the group to feel complete. You know that your clearest thinking happens in solitude, not in the noise of constant collaboration. You know that your instincts are trustworthy, that your accountability makes you faster, and that your self-validation makes you uncontrollable to people who are only comfortable with those they can control. You know that the versions of yourself you perform to stay inside their system were never the real ones, and you know what the real one looks like because you have been living as the real one every day since you stopped performing. That knowledge is not something they can take from you. It is not something the next difficult season can erase. It is structural now. It is load-bearing. It is the foundation that everything you build from this point forward sits on. And that foundation did not come from having the right people around you. It came from having the right relationship with yourself, the only relationship that was ever going to hold the weight of what you are building anyway. You do not need them, you never did. Keep moving, not because you have something to prove, because you have something to build. And what you are building does not need anyone's permission to be extraordinary. It already is.